Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over a debate that a lot of Fortnite players probably struggle with: high sensitivity versus low sensitivity. For controller Fortnite players specifically, there are just so many different sensitivities in the game. You have your regular X and Y sensitivity, which is for non-ADS aiming. You have targeting sensitivity, which is for when you aim down sights. Scope sensitivity, building sensitivity, and editing sensitivity. So for each of the different sensitivities, we're going to be breaking down the positives and negatives of using a high sensitivity value versus the positives and negatives of using a low sensitivity value. And of course, I'll also talk about what I would personally recommend depending on your playstyle and general skill level as a player. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so let's start this video off by talking about the aiming sensitivities in Fortnite. So X and Y sensitivity, targeting/ADS sensitivity, and scope sensitivity. So here's basically the argument for using high aiming sensitivities in Fortnite, or really any other shooter video game out there. If you're confident in your aim and ability to consistently hit shots, a high sensitivity is always going to give you an advantage over a low sensitivity. This is most apparent in something like close-range shotgun fights, but even in medium or long-range ADS fights, if you have a higher sensitivity, you'll be able to adjust to the movements that your enemies make much faster. And unlike a lot of other more basic shooter games out there, the variety of different movements that can be done in Fortnite is actually pretty insane. The first part of that is the basic movements like sprinting, crouching, and jumping, and advanced players will even chain a combination of those movements together in a lot of situations. Spam crouching and crouch jumping are just two examples of what I mean by that. But what really sets Fortnite apart in terms of movement is building and all of the different mobility items available in the game. When a player's ramp rushing, for example, they're going to be moving left/right and up/down at the same exact time. With a low sensitivity, that's going to be very hard to follow, especially if they're sprinting. And all the various forms of enhanced mobility in Fortnite are an even bigger example of things that make a player very hard to track with low sensitivity. Sure, right now the only mobility vehicle in the game is drift boards, but there are also rifts, launch pads, and shockwave grenades. So just imagine how hard it's going to be to track and hit shots on a player doing something like riding on a drift board, or gliding through the air after hitting a launch pad, or worst of all, trying to hit someone who just shockwaved themselves. But on the flip side, the argument for low sensitivity is fairly simple as well. Yeah, sure, in a perfect universe where you hit every single shot, playing on super high sensitivity is obviously going to give you the biggest advantage. But odds are, no matter how much you practice with a high sensitivity, you'll always be less accurate than you would be on a slightly lower sensitivity. On top of that, outside factors such as FPS and ping can make it even harder to play on high sensitivity. If you're a console player, you probably average about 50 frames per second in an average game. That means that your game is going to feel much choppier and less responsive than a high FPS PC player, for example, and therefore higher sensitivity is going to be even harder to control. It's pretty much the same thing with ping, although the effect that has is definitely less than FPS. However, higher ping makes things feel more delayed, and therefore it's also harder to control higher sensitivities. So in general, here are my thoughts. I personally believe that you want to lean more towards higher aiming sensitivity in Fortnite. Especially with X and Y, I really don't think you can be effective on anything under 5 sensitivity. You're just going to be way too slow to track players in so many common situations. And that's the difference between Fortnite and a game like Call of Duty, where the majority of players will use a sensitivity like 3 or 4 out of 10. However, you also don't want to go too high with it. Although 9 or 10 sensitivity may feel great for things like flick shots with a shotgun, I just don't believe your aim will ever be consistent enough no matter how much you practice. So for X and Y, I think 6 to 8 is the money zone, and I believe low FPS / high ping players should probably aim for the lower end of that. And in terms of ADS sensitivity, it really depends on your X and Y. A good rule of thumb is that when you multiply your X/Y sensitivity by your ADS sensitivity, you want the number you get as a result to be in the range of roughly 2.3 to 2.8. Again, FPS and ping play a role in whether you want to be on the higher or lower end of that, but for most people, that'll act as a good starting point. Now let's move on to the discussion of high sensitivity versus low sensitivity for your building and editing sense. The answer for this one may seem more obvious than it is for aiming, but it probably isn't as clear-cut as you may believe. The vast majority of players are going to tell you that for building and editing, the higher the sensitivity, the better. And that actually does make a lot of sense because building and editing requires significantly less precision than aiming, so in theory, it should be easier to handle a higher sensitivity. For example, plenty of people play on the equivalent of 14 or 15 building sensitivity, but if you were to ever try aiming on 14 or 15 sensitivity, it would, in all likelihood, be a disaster. However, recently there's been somewhat of a movement of controller players switching to lower building and editing sensitivities. This trend apparently was started by a few of the top-tier creative mode 1v1 players, and here's the basic reasoning behind it. Will a super high building sensitivity make your building a little faster? Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And in the same regard, will a super high editing sensitivity allow you to edit a little faster? Sure. But at the same time, it may also have a negative impact on your aim. Let's say you're playing on 7x, 7y sensitivity with a 2.0 building sensitivity multiplier, which is actually very similar to what I use. When you're building, it's going to basically be at the speed of 14 sensitivity. But as soon as you put your building menu away and you have a weapon in your hand, you're now immediately back at 7x, 7y sensitivity. This is obviously a very hard transition to make, and it'll actually happen very frequently in any kind of build fight, especially against another really good player. I mean, just think of all the times you ramp up to someone, take a shotgun shot, build a wall, take another shotgun shot. In those situations, if you use a really high building sensitivity multiplier, you're going to keep shifting back and forth from a super high sensitivity to a lower and much more normal sensitivity. The same exact thing could be said for editing as well. Let's say you shoot a shotgun shot, then edit a wall, take another shot, reset the edit. Again, so much switching back and forth between two dramatically different sensitivity values. And because of all that, I think it makes a lot of sense that this low building and editing sensitivity movement really started with prominent 1v1 players. Because those types of players are basically masters of instantly switching between building, editing, and shooting. So what would I recommend? I think it really depends on your playstyle. If you're someone that loves to do a lot of 1v1s and you love outplaying players with quick build and edit shots, maybe you should consider giving a lower build and edit sensitivity a try, because you may feel a noticeable improvement in your aim immediately after building or editing. Especially because apparently the difference between like a 1.2 building sensitivity multiplier and a 2.0 building sensitivity multiplier really doesn't feel as different as you'd expect. You can still build pretty darn fast if you're good enough. but I still would probably say that a high building and editing sensitivity multiplier is gonna be better for the majority of players. Maybe not as high as 2.0, especially if you play on console with low FPS, but I think a 1.5 to 1.8 multiplier is gonna be a good starting point for the majority of players. I think that's high enough to keep up with the super high sensitivity builders and editors, while also not being too high to where it's going to be really difficult to hit shots after you build or edit. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. I want to know, what value do you use for your building and editing sensitivity multiplier in Fortnite? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.